Merkel Media.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Look, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker! States!
I'm Chris Hansen with Daylight NBC.
Jack Marius Tactheratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus. Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track 2.3 actions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Swangles in Fort Lauderdale.
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the seas.
It could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now,
That's what assholes call it.
with your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat? You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you are watching us on Iconic, Odyssey, Rockfin, Band.video, or you're listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We know you got a lot of choices out there to spend some time with us. It means a lot. We deeply are appreciative and grateful. And if you like the show, please take the additional step of sharing it with your friends and family. We need that. It helps us to grow. Thanks to the sponsors that have been with us. Solar Power Lifestyle is a new one for us. Fan of the show, listener of the show, reader of the books. We love that. It's a veteran-owned company. It's family business, small business, focused on harvesting the power of the sun. They are in the solar power business. If you're interested in panels for your roof, you need portable devices that you can take on your job site. If you're camping, you van life, all that stuff, driving across country, emergencies, they've got just about, you've got a cabin somewhere and you want, you're sort of off the grid, you need some electricity for it. It might be worth taking a look at them. Free shipping on all products, and they've got a whole sort of all the big name products. They've got EcoFlow and Jackery and a bunch of other ones. So if there's, if you're looking for a particular brand, they probably have it there. There is free shipping on all products. There's a 30-day price match guarantee, which is pretty nice. And when you spend $100, they'll donate $10 to a charity of your choice. If you use the promo code MACRO, you will save additional money on this. It's worth taking a look and checking out. SolarPowerLifestyle.com. Use the promo code MACRO. Save yourself a couple bucks. And of course, it goes to support a small business that we like. We love small businesses. We also love small businesses that enjoy this show too. So kind of a nice win-win. So take a look, see what you think. The link is going to be in the description for Solar Power Lifestyle. Use the promo code MACRO on your way out. Also, thanks to True Hemp Science. I should have worn my hat that they sent me. It's a great hat. Look, they're making the best hemp-based CBD out there. They're small business, again, in Austin, Texas. They love the show. We love that they love the show, but we also love their products. They sent me a batch of things, but one that I'm back on again. This is Bioactive Silicate. It's a little 2-ounce bottle like this, costs about $40. What you do is you take a 1-gallon jug of distilled water, pour this in, shake the jug up, and then every morning you drink a little bit. You have a couple ounces in the morning, a couple ounces in the evening. And what it does is it works to reset the pH balance inside your body. With our modern Western diets, we really screw that up. So it's nice to kind of try to alkalize the body back to normal, which is 7.0. So it helps to kill bacteria, biofilm. It kills nanobacteria, which clogs arteries. I didn't even know nanobacteria existed until this. It detoxifies the body. This is my second cycle through. It took me about a month, about 5 weeks or so to get through the first jug, and now I'm on it again. So look, it detoxifies your body, which God knows we need that, considering how crazy things are. And look, toxins are what disease lives on, and they create an acidic environment that's conductive to diseases. So if you can change the acidity level of your body and alkalize it a little bit more, that helps. So improves joints, tendons, tissue repair, flexibility, skin health, wrinkle prevention, sleep regulation, all kinds of things. It's $40. Go take a look. It's called Bioactive Silicate. You probably have never heard of it before, but I'll tell you what, now that you've heard of it, you'll probably start to see it everywhere. truehempscience.com/macroaggressions. Links in the description. Use the promo code MACRO on your way out to save yourself a little bit of money. God knows we could use that these days. And anything that works to support the sponsors helps to support the show. You might, for those of you just listening in audio format, you're not going to notice this, but I am wearing my Building 7 shirt. It is appropriate for today's show because we're going to talk about 9/11. As we get right up on that date, there's always going to be shows talking about, well, I don't know. I mean, talking about the most important event in my lifetime, I would say. This was my generation's Kennedy assassination. You know, everybody knows where they were when Kennedy happened. And everybody knows where they were on 9/11. I mean, except, you know, everybody knows where they are with Kennedy except for George H.W. Bush. He just can't remember. He couldn't remember where he was. He remembers where he was on 9/11, though. George H.W. Bush was in Washington, D.C., not W. W was in the White House, no, actually, W was in Florida, but his son was theoretically, you know, president in the White House. But the dad, George H.W. Bush, was in Washington, D.C., having a meeting on behalf of the Carlyle Group with the Bin Laden family, which is totally, I'm sure, just a real normal coincidence that happens when your son, the president of the United States, is in the middle of a huge calamity, a catastrophe even, and the perpetrator is the son of the person that you're having a business meeting with. But I'm sure that's just totally organic and authentic, and nothing unusual happened there or anything. Oh my God. Look, here's the deal. 9/11 is now eligible to go drink alcohol on the 21st anniversary. And I mention that because it's tempting to be dismissive of that and to say, oh, well, you know, that's ancient history. That happened a long time ago. It's, you know, we've got COVID now, and we've got all these things to worry about that, you know, we've got all these other wars, and 9/11 is in the past. Yeah, it was weird and it was terrible and everything, but it's not, it shouldn't be our focus. Well, I disagree. I mean, I disagree wholeheartedly, because to not understand 9/11 is to not understand what's going on right now. And when you dig into the lead up to 9/11, the day itself, and then especially the aftermath of that, like what happened as a result of these attacks by 19 Arab hijackers with box cutters, which, you know, is laughable, you know, but what came in the wake of that is one of the more important parts. It's kind of hard to rank what's the most important lessons to learn from 9/11. They're all important, but I'd say that there are some policies that sprung from that are currently in place today. Patriot Act, you know, and things like that, and what the Patriot Act brought us, that never went away. Just take your shoes off when you go through security at the airport temporarily. It's for your safety. You know, that's what the Germans used to say, right? It's for your safety. Well, are you still taking off your shoes to this day? Yeah, it's not temporary. You know, Temporary government actions are never temporary. And speaking of Germans, one of the things I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to go through my Octopus of Global Control book. If you don't have this book, it's worth purchase. And obviously, I wrote it, and so I make money from it. So it sounds like a sales pitch, but which it is, I guess, in some respects. But just a nice, succinct one book where you can have that covers quite a few topics. And one of the topics I'm going to get into is 9/11, but I wanted to have the book right out here so I could read some of the quotes from it. If you're unfamiliar, the Octopus of Global Control book came out in 2017. It's my first book, and the format of the book is unusual in that it has quotes from over 500 different people that had an interesting take or were involved in some of the most important events of our for our history, not necessarily our lifetime, because some of the quotes are from, over 100 years ago, but these people saw things and were explaining it in a way that didn't wind up on the nightly news. So I compiled this into a book, and I think it's going to be important to sort of reference these quotes and reference these stories because they're still relevant. It's like I said, it's 21 years later, but unlike your cell phone, which is obsolete, the quotes and the talking about 9/11 is still as relevant today as it was back then. So speaking of Germans, I want to read this. This is from Joseph Goebbels. And I think it's important that we start off with this. When talking about 9/11, you have to understand the big lie. And this is from Goebbels. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. See, that's the reason why I speak at anarchist conventions. That's the reason why I wrote a book with Berwick from Anarchapulco, because the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. And the state is the biggest problem we face. Many of these originated from people close to the president's thinking said, intelligence agencies, this stuff. These are all state-sanctioned propaganda. And if you don't understand state propaganda, you'll never understand 9/11. And if you don't understand 9/11, you'll have a harder time understanding COVID. You might figure it out. But if you know 9/11, if you know how that worked, if you understood the flow of information, if you understood what was working in the background, how these guys were doing it, how they plotted years in advance for this, then you'll have a hard time understanding the COVID situation, because they, not to mention there were some of the same overlap, same players involved in this thing, but just the same idea, the same style, the same process, that this takes years of careful planning in advance. You have to have the right people in place. And by right people, I mean sociopaths of the highest order, but you have to have them in place. You have to have full buy-in by them, whether that comes because they have no problem working against humanity, or they're being blackmailed into doing it, or they know the consequences of getting on the wrong side of these people equals death, the above. So it's important for us to understand the role of propaganda, state-sanctioned propaganda. I've made this comment before, I'll say it again, whether it's JFK, COVID, one of the common denominators there is that the media is always driving the getaway car. And 9/11 is no different. In fact, it was on full display. We saw some straight up lie. We saw them parrot talking points. Hell, the intro to this podcast has Garrett Utley from NBC News saying a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that. He couldn't believe that the words were coming out of his mouth. He had to qualify it with, if you can believe that. Look, the answer is, we can't believe that. You shouldn't believe that. If you do believe that, you have to have a good talk with yourself. Good hard look in the mirror. Why are you believing these things? Why are you believing these obvious lies? I mean, think about it. Maybe you just have never questioned this, but if you think that a hijacker's passport was found at the foot of an FBI agent blocks away from the World Trade Center crash site, that it was in his pocket or briefcase or whatever, that he was on an airplane that flew into the Twin Towers and exploded in a huge fireball, and that passport flew out of his pocket, out of the fuselage of the plane, through the wreckage of the building, through the fireball, through the dust cloud, blocks flew in the air, blocks away, and happened to land at the foot of an FBI agent in perfect condition. You are functionally sorry. I'm not sugarcoating any of this. If you believe that story, you're dumb. Don't be dumb. Okay? Stop it. They depend on people being dumb. Stanley Milgram, the Milgram Experience, said 80% of people do not have the ability for critical thinking. That lie works on 80% of the people. Not this audience. This audience is way past that. We're not tolerating any of that stuff. So I wanted to do a different episode on 9/11. Everyone does the same thing. I think I've done the same thing. I've done some episodes on it. And I want to mix it up. I want to come at it from a different angle, an unusual angle. To be fair, a very unusual angle. But I think it's time that we recognize that there's a little bit more to this world than what we see with our own eyes, or hear with our own ears, or smell with our nose. And there's a world beyond our five senses. And I've mentioned this before. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the term remote viewing, remote viewing is when a person can be a person is in one location and can see things that are happening in a different physical location, a different time zone, time frame. They can see things that you shouldn't normally or rightly be able to see. And it sounds woo-woo and fake and make-believe the first time you hear it. I completely recognize that. It looks like somebody doing bullshit magic tricks. Okay. But hang with me on this, because I think, look, the CIA spent a fortune and decades trying to figure out how to weaponize remote viewing. The SRI, Stanford Research Institute, deeply involved in this. Pat Price, Pat Price. Oh God, I forgot all the names. There's a few that came out of this group, and they were Ingo Swann, of course. Ingo Swann, best known for remote viewing Jupiter in advance of the Voyager missions that were sent out there, and he was looking. They had the story behind Ingo Swann remote viewing Jupiter's crazy, where they met him and they black bagged him and took him put him on a car, and then took him on a helicopter and flew him somewhere, and then down some elevator shaft that just kept going and going and going, and they wound up in some room. They took the hood off and they said, okay, we want you to, they paid him for it. He agreed to it, and he was being paid for it. He wasn't necessarily being kidnapped. He was doing this, of his own free will, but there was some sort of like, we can't let you know where we're taking you sort of thing. So they took him down, they made him remote view, or didn't make him, they asked him to remote view a coordinate. Now, the way remote viewing works, and I'm no expert, but I know a little bit, is that they don't say, we want you to remote view Jupiter and tell us what you see. That what they do is they give him a set of numbers, and these numbers mean nothing to anybody except that the person that is put these numbers out, that the person that has designated these numbers is the one that's in charge of the experiment. That person knows we're going to be looking at Jupiter and we're going to be looking for certain things, and that's what's going into these numbers, and I'm putting the energy of Jupiter into these numbers, and now I'm going to give this guy, Ingo Swann, he's going to say, what's my target? And they're going to write down like 8 numbers, which aren't coordinates or geolocations or anything like that. Just write this down, and he's going to look at that, and then from that, through his training and psychic abilities, although I don't even really know if psychic abilities necessarily plays into this, because you can teach somebody to remote view. But anyway, I'm going into the description of remote viewing for a specific reason, because we're going to get into what the guy saw that remote viewed 9/11. And it's important to understand that it's very easy to dismiss this stuff as hocus pocus. And when you watch them on video doing remote viewing, it probably won't set your mind at ease either, because it looks like they're making it up. Of course, they're sort of like pondering and staring and drawing on dry erase boards, and they're drawing things, and and they're talking it out, and it's all by themselves, video camera, just the viewer and a dry erase board and the target number, and they've got that written, and then they just go and they say what they want to say. This is what I see, this is what I feel. A lot of it is feeling, it's intuitive, they're going through different, there's a format to it. And like I said, I'm no expert at it. I've watched enough of this. I've read enough about it. I know it's real. It's 100% real. It sounds crazy and it sounds like it shouldn't be real. But look, I will say this. Anybody that just reflexively says that's impossible, my follow-up question would be, have you ever taken psychedelics before? If the answer is no, if the answer is remote viewing is impossible, have you ever taken psychedelics? No, then I'm not interested in what you think. Because if you have taken psychedelics, then you understand that there is a world beyond the world that you see. And just because you can't do that right now in this sober, quote, normal life, doesn't mean that it can't be done. So if you want to be dismissive of remote viewing because you think it sounds crazy, I get it. It does sound crazy. And wait till you watch it being done live. It looks crazy too. Okay. Nothing about that is going to make you feel like, oh, this is legit, until you watch enough of these guys do these things. Now, the best in the business have about a 65% accuracy rate. That's the number that Pat Price was told to get to. Once he got to a 65% accuracy rate, or maybe it was Ingo Swann. I think it was Ingo Swann. That's what it was. It was Ingo, because that's when they said, well, once you get to 65%, then let us know. Then we need you for this mission. He got to 65%. They said, great, we got a mission for you. So it's not perfect. It's not. But in order to mitigate that, you have multiple remote viewers do the same target that don't know that they're doing the same target. And then what you do is you compare and you say, well, what did you guys all what was the common denominator that you got? What did you get here? Some people will say, oh, I saw this, and they felt something differently. And, but they all saw the same building. They saw a building. They didn't know where it was. One guy said, I feel like it's in an urban area. And the other guy says, well, it's a big building and I don't know where it is. But so you find the common denominators there. And so with 9/11, years later, like 15 years later, Farsight Institute had been they're begging them, please remote view 9/11. And I guess Courtney Brown, the head of Farsight Institute, said, well, you know, like we can't just do that right away because the remote viewers will know what the target is. So they had to wait years and years and years. In fact, not only that, I think Courtney said publicly and maybe even privately to the team, we're never going to remote view 9/11. So these guys had no reason to think they were remote viewing 9/11. I guess he'd been very clear that we're not going to do it. So when they finally did do it, the viewers didn't have any reason to believe that they were on a 9/11 assignment because as far as they knew, it was sort of like, it's too on the nose. We're just going to stay away from that one. So there's two videos, and I want to credit Dustin, one of our listeners, with sending me the videos. Now when he sent them to me, I said, I didn't know about this, but the truth is, after I got done watching both of them, I was sort of half right. I did know about the first one. I just didn't know there was a part 2. So he sent both of them over, and I watched part 1. I was like, oh, I don't think I've seen this. And I watched part 1. I'm like, oh no, I have seen this, but I watched it again. What I didn't realize is that there was a part 2. I watched that again, or I watched that for the first time, and it's wild. And the links for those are going to be in the show notes so that you can go and watch them yourselves. They're each 2 hours, and it's Dick Allgaier in Hawaii and Daz Smith in the UK that's doing this. And then Courtney Brown is the head of Farsight, and he's the one that basically said, you know, he's sort of the guy who says, these are your coordinates. And so they're remote viewing literally on opposite sides of the world. And the results that they get, and I think they gave them 8 different targets. So it wasn't all just New York City downtown, Lower Manhattan on the morning of September 11th. There's a variety of places, and I wanted to go over this because it was a really good reminder of what was happening on 9/11. And some of this stuff, I got to be honest, I kind of forgot it was happening. So, and look, everybody does 9/11 episodes. So why not do one that's a little unusual? And that's what this is going to be. It's going to be weird, okay? But hang with me because it's worth it. And when you watch these videos, after you listen to this episode and you say, well, maybe I'll watch one of those videos, watch them. It'll blow your mind. Even if you think this stuff is like hocus pocus. And again, I fully understand that. Okay. It's such an obscure and unusual talent that most of us don't have, or at least don't know that we have. I think maybe inherently we all have this, and that it gets suppressed by school and parents and our own self-doubt, and nobody teaches you how to do it really. And I think that these skills are maybe dormant in a lot of people. And that in some are just better than others at accessing this and practicing, and you have to sort of be like very clear-headed. And I guess from what I've read, the toughest part is like not dragging your own personal biases into this. You know, you're trying to stay as objective as you can. So I wrote down a ton of notes on this, and some of them are a little bit, sort of out of, not necessarily in the proper order. So I'm going to do the best that I can with this and just go off of some of the notes. But ultimately, this is like an advertisement for Farsight Institute in a sense, because I want you to watch the videos. Watch the videos and tell me what you think. Okay. For those of you, like Dick Allgaier is the guy in Hawaii. He's like a newscaster in Hawaii for like a long, long time. Like he just worked at the news station. He was like the anchor guy, and had a deep interest in this, and wound up working for like a long, long time, to over a decade to improve his skills and get to the point where he's turned into one of the best remote viewers out there. So he's one of the guys that's doing this. Daz Smith, you can watch, and they, they draw on the erase board, and they kind of get their minds into this right space, and they start feeling things. And I don't know the checklist that they're going through in their heads, but they come out with some interesting things. So some of the keywords that they used were infiltrated attack. Okay. You know, we hear about this. 9/11 was an inside job. With this, I'll explain why I think that this assessment of 9/11 that these guys saw, what the things that they saw, I think this is the most accurate version of 9/11 that I've seen. It's not to say it's all perfect, and of course, there's room for discussion and debate, and even Courtney Brown, the head of Farsight Institute, will say remote viewing doesn't prove anything. It just tells you what these guys see. Proof, you go find that on your own. But so knowing that and hearing what these guys say about an event that they're viewing that they don't know is 9/11. They never know it's 9/11, right? So I think I think at some point you'd probably have to figure it out, right? So they're talking about an infiltrated attack. They're talking about powerful group. And the reason when I bring these up, it's because both viewers came to the same conclusions, or not. I guess they're not allowed to come to conclusions, but they both saw the same things. Okay. Powerful group giving instructions to 3 other groups. So there's one group and they were giving instructions to 3 other groups. And in each of these 3 other groups, there was between 4 and 8 guys in each of these groups. All men. Some were military, some were not. There was a scenario where there was a big table, like one of those, they described it as if you're on an aircraft carrier and you're launching planes and you need to know what planes you have available and what planes have launched. You'll have like a big table and they'll physically move like a plane out there, or they'll, sort of like you can, like generals would do, right? So they're sitting around this big table and there's generals and they're VIP. And he described it as very trusted people. The people that are in this room all can be trusted. And so they're making moves, they're making decisions, they're talking about things, they're very focused on what's going on in this control room. I'm going to get to more of this. There's oh God, man. They said that this command center that they're in, this control room command center, is covered by a Faraday cage and camouflaged through electronic cloaking. And big table, big decisions being made at this table. Okay, so sort of like you can take that. So team one was 4 to 8 males, well trained, working as a unit, and they were outside and mobile, like spotters. And he said it feels like they're attacking something. I mean, in my head, I immediately go to urban moving. Spotters, mobile, attacking, 4 to 8 males, working as a unit. If you don't know who Urban Moving Systems is, well, you'll figure it out. Team 2. This was South Tower Plane. He said 4 to 8 males, well-trained, working as a unit, in control of fast-moving structural object. Okay, this was South Tower Plane. And Team 3, 4 to 8 males, infiltrated a structure, placed brick objects that were flat. This is what they kind of came up with to destroy this structure that they had infiltrated. Now, this is Building 7. Why I'm worried. So, he said that there's 6 to 12 managers, untouchable. They know what they are doing. Described their work as covert, business-like, security-related, political. Change was one of the words he used, and he said it was going to kickstart something. It felt like this decision, these managers were working hard to kickstart something. So these are the groups. This is the big group, and then there's 3 teams underneath it, right? So the 6 to 12 managers, he described them as all being untouchable. And I thought, okay, I know who he's talking about. He's talking about Cheney. He's talking about these guys. They never say that. To be fair, they don't name names. They don't do any of that stuff. So let's talk about Team 3 real quick. Building 7. Now, for those of you that you got to know about Building 7. Building 7 is a 47-story steel and glass high-rise structure that collapsed into its own footprint at free fall speed at 5:25 in the afternoon on September 11th, 2001 in New York City. It's the Salomon Brothers building, Salomon Bank building. It is officially known, or unofficially known, I guess, as Building 7. It is in the World Trade Center complex of multiple buildings, it being this. It deniable. NIST denies it, but they're pathological liars. And Richard Gage has been on this show. God knows, we've talked at length about him. We've got a whole chapter in the Octopus book about his work with architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. Undeniable that Building 7, statistically impossible for it to have come down by office fires. It was proven through a 4-year study with the University of Fairbanks, Alaska, that the only way Building 7 came down was in a controlled demolition with explosives being used to remove the support columns all within nanoseconds of one another, the way you would a controlled demolition. So these guys are talking about, so when it comes to Building 7, it wasn't hit by a plane, but it came down that later that day. And everyone went, that's weird. And then, of course, we have Larry Silverstein on camera saying, there was such tremendous loss of life. And, given everything that we'd been through, we thought that the smartest thing to do was pull it. And so they made the decision and they pulled the building and brought it down. Pulling it is a demolition term for bringing the building down. He wasn't talking about pulling firefighters out or any of these lies that he tried to tell. He admitted on camera that they made the decision to bring down the building intentionally. So you've got these remote viewers that don't know what they're looking at. They say, well, there is a group that is secretly entering a structure in the city through a basement level, placing bricks that are bendable like plastic on columns. They said these guys are experts. They're working fast. He said they've never been in this building. It doesn't look like they've been in this building before because they're reading a map, but they've done this work before because they know exactly what they're doing. He described them as a special forces unit, or a group that felt like a special forces group. Experts, fast. He said they're spies under orders to destroy the building to keep secrets from being revealed. That was the vibe that he got. Attacking the structure from inside. And then he described intense energy. So we've got... So let's, if you've seen the building come down, I have been told by people that would know this, can you rig a building to come down? Can you rig a building like that to come down quickly? I've been told no. I've been told that it would take a much larger team than 4 to 8 guys, and it would take a whole lot longer than that. So to be clear, I don't know. I don't know about this because you might need to wire this building. It might take a little bit longer. But again, they're not saying that it wasn't wired in advance on other floors. They're just saying that these guys came in. I mean, I don't know why they would come in secretly if it was already wired, but so it's sort of implied. But I'm just relaying what they said. So we've got massive confusion after impact in urban location and lots of death. They all picked up on that. So, and there were maps. So they said that this big group of powerful men, the 6 to 12 managers, the untouchable ones that were giving these decisions, they were in a facility that felt like a big boardroom, but it had no windows. And it, like he said, it was covered by a Faraday cage and electronically cloaked. I don't know what that means. In my head, it's the PEOC, right? It's the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, which is in the basement level of the White House, which is where Cheney went when this was going on. But it's not to say it couldn't have been in the basement level of the Pentagon, because, and let me tell you why in a second, there is a fellow that makes an appearance in here. And when you watch the videos, you're going to be like, it's undeniable who they drew. They drew the guy that was in charge of all of this, and it's fucking Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, he drew a picture and described the voice and described the Midwestern Ohio style accent that he had. And he described this guy as a psychopath of the highest order who seems really friendly on the outside, but would have no compunction to order the murder of a school filled with children and then go play with his grandkids afterwards. That's exactly what he said. And so you go, oh shit. And he draws, and he goes, and these glasses are almost invisible. And he draws them out and he goes, that's not right. And he redraws it and he goes, yeah, they're sort of like invisible glass. And you go pull up any picture of Donald Rumsfeld, hold it next to this picture, and you'll be like, oh my God. Okay. Now, Rumsfeld was at the Pentagon. We know this because he did that unusual photo op after the plane crashed in the Pentagon, where he's out on the front lawn helping to pick up pieces, which makes no sense, except that it's a photo op and it pins him as being at the Pentagon at that time after the explosion. So he could have been down in a basement and he could have been doing all of this stuff. But he described him as having a smirk and described him as evil. And I was like, well, that's Donald Rumsfeld. Limited to him. Could be Dick Cheney too, right? But when you see the drawing, you go, oh, that's Rummy for sure. So we've got terms that they use. Controlled demolition. Yeah, I use that term as well. He drew, so in this command center, they drew it out, and it's maps, the big map on the bottom, that they're all kind of huddled around. There's monitoring stations. There's televisions everywhere. There's monitoring stations, and this is happening in real time. He said there's a few people in there. He said that there's these guys have notes. He described them as all having these very professionally made folders and notes about this, but he also had the impression that they weren't allowed to take these folders and notes anywhere. They weren't allowed to leave the room with them. These all went into a safe and were locked up when they were done with it, for whatever that means. So he described an AWACS plane, which is a plane that is focused on communications. It's the plane with the big circle dish above it, that kind of looks funny and unusual. He described an AWAC plane, and he knew it was an AWAC plane because it had a fuselage with no windows and a bunch of people lined up in a single row working at monitors in this plane that looked exactly like an AWAC plane. He goes, that's how I would describe it, because these people he said, you don't have seatbelts on chairs when you're in an office. And so he said all these seats had seatbelts. So I knew that they're airplanes, and it looked like that command center. He said that was operating. He said they described also in this room, he described it as a CIA. I'm sorry. Let me take this back. A different room. This was a different thing that they were remote viewing. So a different room, but he said in this different room, he saw what he described as a CIA document forgery station. And there were standing desks and state-of-the-art computers for like the late 90s. And he said it looked like they were making fake bearer bonds in there. The guys that were doing the forgeries were like really good, and they're at standing desks, and they were making what he said. It looks like they're making fake documents. It looks like they're making fake bearer bonds. So I was like, interesting. Some of this stuff might not ring a bell, might not connect to anything. You might just go, well, it doesn't mean anything. But later you'll read something, you'll go, oh shit, there were fake bearer bonds, or there was fake this or that. It might trigger something later in you to to connect the dots. He said the whole scene had a feeling like a Hollywood film. The whole thing felt like you were watching a movie. It was like very movie-like. Okay, and he drew something. Dick Allgaier drew something that I thought was really alarming. And that was a small, and he pondered how they could do this, but he drew this small round, almost looked like a beer keg sort of. And he described it as a mini nuke. And he said, how can you, he goes, like kilotons, megatons, all that stuff. He goes, yeah. You hear these terms. He goes, this was like 0.01% of a kiloton, like it wasn't big. It wasn't really all that big. It wasn't like you expect a nuclear bomb to be. And he's kind of looking at it and he's going, I don't even know if they make them this small. Why would they make them this small? But he's like, this is what I'm getting. And again, like I said, you can read, you can dismiss this as being like hocus pocus, and that's certainly your right to do it. Watch the videos. It'll blow your mind. Okay. So mini nuke, and he's talking about dust, dustification, microscopic dust as a result of this mini nuke, So, you're watching this and you're going, okay, this is sounding like a conversation we've had before. Planes, no planes, mini nukes, thermite, nanothermite. What is it? What's going on in here? Well, according to what they found, that he saw guys wrapping plastic explosives around columns in buildings, in a building that sounded like buildings. He saw a mini in one of the towers. So, make of that what you will. Now, to the Pentagon, this was an interesting one because there's a line of thinking that doesn't get a whole lot of attention when it comes to what happened at the Pentagon. I've known about it for a while. Maybe you've known about it as well. And I think it is actually the most reasonable explanation for what happened at the Pentagon. Now, to rewind a little bit, there was a situation that was happening on the morning of September 11th in the Pentagon. I guess it had been triggered in advance of it, but there was a meeting that was taking place where they were trying to determine the source of a lot of missing money. And, Rumsfeld announced in the intro to this podcast, we cannot account for $2.3 trillion of transactions. He announced that on September 10th, 2001, is because he knew it would get thrown off of the news cycle immediately the following day because he knew he was going to be in charge of running 9/11. And so they told everybody that was involved in discovering and working on this missing money to meet in a particular conference room at a certain time and bring all the evidence you've got. We're going to get to the bottom of this. And that's the part of the Pentagon that blew up. Now, when he is describing this, he says, have you ever seen like submarines where they launch a missile and it forces the missile up with compressed air, like up out of the water, and it shoots it up out of the water, I don't know, 100 yards or so, but and then the engine kind of kicks on and the flames come out, and then it looks almost like it's going to fall back down into the water until that engine kicks on, and then it takes off. He said, you can see this. He's in his head. He's like, oh, he goes, that's like a missile being launched from a submarine, right? He goes, yeah, it forces it up, and then the engines kick on and it takes off, and he's going, ooh. And he goes, I just keep hearing Popeye. I don't know what Popeye is, but he goes, I'm going to write it down. I just keep hearing Popeye. Well, if you look up what Popeye is a missile found in Israeli subs. Again, if you want to discount this stuff and say that these guys are all making it up, that's fine. I fully recognize this is obscure and unusual science, and it requires a certain amount of discounting because it is very hard to prove, okay? And it does give you the opportunity to bullshit people if you wanted to. I fully recognize that, okay? Watch the videos. See what you think. Because, there has been talk that that missile came from an Israeli sub. Now, there's a lot of people say, well, no, an airplane flew into the Pentagon. Now, I ask you this. The Pentagon is one of the most heavily protected buildings. Let me rephrase that. The Pentagon is the most heavily protected building in the world. If you have an airplane that comes anywhere near that, it has defense systems that pop up and shoot those things down. Okay, so an airplane coming in inbound, doing a 270-degree corkscrew turn to come in there parallel with the Pentagon and hit it is an impossibility. Okay, first of all, couldn't have been done. Hijackers couldn't have done it. Pilots, professional pilots have said on the record, impossible. Can't do it. Couldn't make that turn if you wanted to. So what hit the Pentagon? Was it a bomb that went off? Reasonable. That there was a bomb planted in the Pentagon, reasonable. But again, you have to smuggle a bomb into the Pentagon and put it together in there. Okay. Again, the most heavily defended thing. I'm not saying I know exactly what happened with the Pentagon, but I do think it was hit by a missile and not an airplane. The whole doesn't support the airplane theory. I know Ryan Dawson will want to debate me on this, but it just doesn't. And there's wreckage out there, but it's not wreckage from an airplane. And there's an engine, but it's not an engine from an airplane. So whatever. So there's things to consider. Okay. So we've got submarine launch, Popeye missiles, AWAC airplanes that are monitoring this whole thing. We do know that the Doomsday plane was in the air at that time, circling the Pentagon in advance of that. So it was probably, being monitored by this group. We've got, they all describe this when they're talking about the buildings, when they're saying we see these buildings, they're drawing buildings and everything. They say that the unusual thing about these buildings is that they have a function that is never seen in buildings, which is their structure is changing shape. They're describing, they're like, it's a building that structure changes shape and we don't really know why it's changing shape. Well, it's changing shape because it's blowing up. It's in a controlled demolition. So it's changing shape from a building into a pile of dust. And they're all going, I don't know, structure changes shape. Don't really know why it's doing that. So, these are some of the keywords that they use, some of the terms that they used. And I think it's worth noting that they also said when it comes to the cockpit, they're viewing the cockpit. Well, they don't know what they're viewing, but they're viewing something. And he starts drawing out a cockpit and he starts drawing out a pilot. And he's saying, there's a pilot, and he's got the controls, but the controls don't do anything. He's trying to work with the controls, but the controls aren't doing anything. And he can't figure out why the controls won't work. I know why the controls won't work. It has to do with the Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot system that was installed in these planes. You can't cut the power to plane. The uninterruptible autopilot will still go because it has its own power source. In fact, the only way you can turn that off is once the plane lands, you have to send an engineer into the plane and disconnect and turn it off somehow. There's an engineer that can turn it off, but you can't shut it off. You can't cut the power to it, to the airplane, and have that turn the uninterruptible autopilot off. It doesn't work that way. It has its own secondary power source. Specifically, this is specific so that if you're being hijacked and the hijacker says, fly us into this, fly us into a building, that the people that have access to this uninterruptible autopilot can land the plane remotely, and that nobody can take over. Once they've engaged the autopilot, you can't disengage it until it's on the ground, everything's turned off, and then they manually do it. So there's no way to turn it off once it's activated. And that is, the reason that this technology exists is to make it so that airline hijackings don't happen anymore. So it's a real thing. It exists. It's not, I'm not making this up. So I wanted to go through some of the quotes about this. So this is from John Croft from Flight Global. The uninterruptible autopilot would be activated either by pilots, by onboard sensors, or even remotely via radio or satellite links by government agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, if terrorists attempt to gain control of the flight deck. And then there's a different quote from him. It says, to make it fully independent, the system has its own power supply. Independent of the aircraft's circuit breakers, the aircraft remains in automatic mode until after landing, when mechanics or government security operatives are called in to disengage the system. So you can't shut it off. There has been real speculation that the planes that flew into the towers were being flown by remote control. And the way that you would do that would be through the Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot that was most definitely on these planes. Now, we get there's a whole other line of thinking when it comes to these planes as well. And they crossed paths over an airbase in New York City, and the transponders turned off. So there is reason to think that the original planes landed and that two drone planes were sent up in place of them. It gets into a weird debate, and it's not something that in an hour-long podcast we can fully get into. 9/11, you could do 100 episodes just on 9/11, and you'd never really get to the bottom of it. But I want to read a quote. These are all in the Octopus book. I want to read a quote from Captain Russ Wittenberg, former U.S. Air Force fighter pilot. He said, I flew the two actual aircrafts which were involved in 9/11, the flight number 175 and flight 93. The 757 that allegedly went down in Shanks, 175 is the aircraft that's alleged to have hit the South Tower. I don't believe it's possible like I said, for a so-called terrorist, to train on a 172 Cessna, then 767 class cockpit, and vertical navigate the aircraft, lateral navigate the aircraft, and fly the airplane at speeds exceeding the design limit speed by well over 100 knots, make high-speed, high-banking turns exceedingly, pulling probably 5, 6, 7 Gs, and the aircraft would literally fall out of the sky. I couldn't do it, and I'm absolutely positive they couldn't do it. That's a dude that not only flew the same types of aircraft, he literally flew those aircrafts. He's saying it can't be done. So look, the remote viewing guys, as part of sort of like standard operating procedure, don't try to inject their thoughts about what they see or what they're drawing or why it's happening or what it is. I mean, they try to stay as objective as possible and not say, oh, well, this is 9/11 and this is they don't do that regardless of the task. They try to I guess that's part of the training. You try to just not interpret it draw what you see, tell us what you see, don't tell us what you think, but just tell us what you're seeing there, or how it's making you feel. I guess that's allowed. So they're not in a position to speculate about what's happening, but we are. And thank God we are. I'm going to read a 3-paragraph quote from Dr. Kevin Barrett, who's a journalist. And I think it's important to read this because you have to have sort of an understanding of what was really going on in 9/11. And I think he encapsulates it very well. So here we go. This is Dr. Kevin Barrett. We know that the 50 were set alleged hijackers because they were not on those planes. Not one of the 19 hijackers or any Arabs were on any of the 4 planes, according to the passenger list, and according to all of the evidence that would be there if they were on the planes, but has not been produced. So these 15 Saudi patsies who were set up to take the blame for 9/11, in fact, CIA agents. We know this. I had this confirmed directly by a CIA source that these 15 Saudis entered and repeatedly re-entered on these supposedly, they call them employment visas, but there's a special number for the employment visas that are only given to CIA assets as a reward for their service to the Central Intelligence Agency. And this visa allows them to come to the U.S. Typically, they're paid for their work for the CIA in Saudi Arabia. And then they're given this special kind of visa, which is disguised as an employment visa, but it's of a particular type. And all 15 of these guys had that visa. That shows that they were, in fact, Central Intelligence Agency agents. Some of them were living with FBI people in California. So these 15 Saudis were not working against the United States government. They were working for the United States government, and they were set up so that Saudi Arabia could potentially be blamed for September 11th attacks, which were actually perpetrated by Israel and its American assets. And that is what I believe as well. I believe that 9/11 was perpetrated by Israel, by a faction of the American government, by Saudi intelligence, and Pakistani ISI had a role. But if you want to pin the blame on anyone, it's the axis of evil. Oh wait. I don't mean the Nazis and Japan, I mean the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. They did this. And you know why they did this? They did this to give them the justification to launch the War on Terror, which is a remaking of the Middle East in their image. And the Project for a New American Century, which is loaded with dual U.S.-Israeli citizens in it, including Rumsfeld, including Cheney. These guys are all in that group. Project for a New American Century plotted this out. There's ample evidence that they were deeply involved in it. So when you know the PNAC story, and when you know that 9/11 is not what it appears to be, and you understand that these planes weren't being flown by 19 Arab hijackers that couldn't land Cessnas, and you know all that stuff is just cover story, and you go, all right, so what happened? What really happened? And then you come across the remote viewing work of these guys, and they start talking about big tables with generals, one group delegating to 3 smaller groups, where you've got one group working as a mobile spotting unit, and then Urban Moving Systems, the Israeli intelligence, the Mossad agents at Urban Moving Systems all wind up getting arrested, detained for 60 days, and then deported to God knows where. Some went to Israel, some went elsewhere, but they were sent out of the United States without facing any charges. That's Team 1 in this scenario. Then you've got Team 2, which is monitoring the airplanes and doing that. They're the ones flying the Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilots, flying the planes into the buildings. And I'm not a no plane guy. And I know that people will send videos and they'll say, well, it looks, you should examine this and everything. There were too many people that saw planes fly into the building. I just don't believe they didn't see United Airlines planes. They found different colored planes. So, take that for what you will. And then you've got Team 3, which is infiltrating a building in a urban area and placing brick objects to destroy it. And they look like they know what they're doing and they're following a map and they're very precise. That's Building 7. Okay, so, you hear this and you go, well, okay, I know the Israelis and Americans were working together and they're involved. What about the Pentagon? Then they come up with this thing. I'm seeing a missile come out of a submarine and the name that just keeps going through my head is Popeye. And then you look up, you go, what is a Popeye missile? And it says found in Israeli subs. And you go, holy shit. Now, is it possible that these remote viewing guys knew this story, had an agenda, and infused it into their remote viewing in order to sell this story to us? Of course, it is possible that happened. I would be not doing my job if I didn't recognize that is at least a possibility, that the whole remote viewing thing could be fake. I just don't think it is, though. And again, the detail that they went into was staggering. And look, as a result of this, so what difference does it make, man? 9/11 happened 21 years ago and it's not going to change anything. Well, let me tell you why it matters. It matters for a variety of reasons, because first of all, if these guys do it once, they'll do it again. There's no reason for them to think that they didn't get caught. There's still a bunch of people that think that Osama bin Laden did it. Like you're fucking dumb if you believe that. You're easily manipulated, or you don't know to look because there's other stories out there you haven't really given. I shouldn't say that you're dumb for it, but you're being gullible. If you think that Osama bin Laden did 9/11, you're being very gullible. I mean, first off, he was a CIA asset with a name Tim Osman, okay? Second of all, like I mentioned at the beginning, his family was having a business meeting with the Bush family at the exact same time. They're in cahoots. You know what I mean? He's not the bad guy. He's a boogeyman. He's made to be the bad guy. You got to have a bad guy. And he fits the role. God damn, he's got the beard and he's very authentic looking, like he fits the idea of like a Muslim terrorist, but forget the part except that he was on our side in the 80s when we were financing the Mujahideen to fight against the Soviets, and we loved him then, but now he's the terrorist boogeyman, don't dig into that, right? Because then you'll see that the whole thing is a gigantic scam. But look, it's important for us to understand this, because what came in the wake of 9/11 was the Patriot Act. And from that, we got the Department of Homeland Security. I mean, Goebbels would be proud of that one, right? And we get TSA, Transportation Safety Authority, where they get to grab your balls and irradiate you through these machines that were financed by the same guys that ran Project for a New American Century. You know what I mean? They're just such cunts that they can't help it. Then not only do they have to kill you, they have to profit from it at the same time. So it's important that we understand this. It's important that you understand that when you had 9/11, Dick Cheney took over, that Bush was pushed out of the way. He was made to be in Florida while that happened, so he wouldn't get in the way of this. I'm not trying to absolve George W. Bush of any crimes, but I think they rightly recognize that he's too stupid to be running this, and maybe even not evil enough. I mean, George W. Bush is an evil guy, don't get me wrong, but he's not Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld evil. And let me remind people that a lot of people think that Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld just magically appeared on the scene in politics in 2000 when they came in with the Bush administration. That is not true. Those two guys worked together in the 70s. Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense in the 70s. Okay. He came back and became Secretary of Defense again under Bush. When Cheney and Rumsfeld got together, they were very close in the 70s. Then they went off. They went and worked for different, Rumsfeld became the CEO of GD Searle, which tried for a decade to get aspartame approved. They couldn't do it because it's a poison. Rumsfeld got involved and became their CEO. Due to his connections with the FDA, got it approved in less than a year, walked away with $13 million. Dick Cheney became the CEO of Halliburton. Okay. And ran that multinational engineering firm for a long, long time. And then they left those positions and then went back into politics. This is the revolving door. When they came in, they had a plan. And part of that plan was to destroy the Middle East and remake it in their image. And if you look at the oil companies that are springing up in the Middle East, trying to drill in Syria, those oil companies, look who the owners are. Take a look. Take a look at who Genie Energy's owners are. Cheney, Rumsfeld. The guys are all involved in this. So it's a plan. It was a plan for a long, long time. You read the Project for a New American Century. Of course, we know about the quote about how there has to be I forget, the smoking gun of PNAC, where they talk about how I wish I could find the quote here. It's not in front of me. These guys are such evil scumbags, but they're talking about the new Pearl Harbor and everything. So it is. Look, I mean, you've even got the guy Judge Ferdinando Impacimato, honorary president, Italian Supreme Court, and former legal consultant to the United Nations, saying, quote, "The 9/11 attacks were a global state terror operation permitted by the administration of the USA, which had foreknowledge of the operation, yet remained intentionally unresponsive in order to make war against Afghanistan and Iraq. To put it briefly, the 9/11 events were an instance of the strategy of tension enacted by political and economic powers in the USA to seek advantage for the oil and arms industry." Strategy of tension. Where have we heard that before? Again, buy the Octopus book if you want. There's a lot going on in there where we lay out the, so there's too much to cover just in one episode here. But this book, I mean, there's I don't even know exactly how many pages I spent on 9/11 specifically, but it is it's worth taking a look. Here's a from terrorism expert Joseph Stalin. The easiest way to gain control of the population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened. You mean like the Patriot Act? Like, we'll take off our shoes and let you inspect our lotions in the by the TSA and let you molest our children if you want to, because we're scared. Yeah, they know this, of course. I'll wrap it up with this. This is a quote from Chris Hedges, the great Chris Hedges, from his book, The Death of the Liberal Class. He said, "The corporations that profit from permanent war need us to be afraid. Fear stops us from objecting to government spending on a bloated military. Fear means we will not ask unpleasant questions of those in power. Fear permits the government to operate in secret. Fear means we are willing to give up our rights and liberties for promises of security. The imposition of fear ensures that the corporations that wreck the country cannot be challenged. Fear keeps us penned in like livestock." Don't be fearful. Okay. Be informed. Do what you can to get yourself informed on these situations. Every time 9/11 comes along, it's another opportunity for us to remember what these guys did, to acknowledge that there is evil in the world. It doesn't, it's not Freddy Krueger or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or anything like that. That's what Hollywood tells you evil looks like. You want to know what real evil looks like? Looks like Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. If you like this episode, you can take the additional step of sharing it with your friends and family. I know it's an unusual one. Get you into the remote viewing world. That'll be fun. Those links are in the show notes. Take a look. Watch those. Watch those if you want to. You can follow me on Twitter @macroaggression. And the website is theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.